Oh man, so we are back. I hope everyone had a great holidays. My holidays were pretty good. Last time before Christmas happened, I actually made a video on the restricted Pokemon for Regulation G and a tier list for that of what like I think were the best restricted Pokemon. However, one of the things that seems to be neglected is the Pokemon that are non-restricted, like all the stuff down here. So I figured we're also going to do a tier list for that so you guys kind of know where to start in the format, because obviously like you're going to build your teams around the restricted Pokemon. That's going to be the centerpiece of your teams, but you probably also want to know like what else is like good or that could like pair with them pretty well. So I made kind of like these group of Pokemon down here that says, obviously you see it says need to rank. These are the Pokemon that I think are worth using that are non-restricted. Anything that's like not on the list, like all the stuff down here, I don't think is great. So, like, not to say that these Pokemon haven't had success in the past. Like, for example, you guys probably see it, like, Heatran. Heatran's, in my opinion, the greatest steel, like, competitive steel-type Pokemon ever for VGC. However, it does have a history of struggling in restricted formats, and even right now, it would struggle a lot just because it doesn't have good matchups into, like, very common stuff like Urshifu Rapid Strike and Zamazenta and Koraidon and Groudon and Kyogre, so on and so forth. So even though it is the greatest steel type probably ever, just because it struggles really heavily in these formats, I decided not to put it in the ranks. Not to say that it's bad, because it has had use in the past, and we're going to definitely see Heatran again in the future, but it struggles in these formats. So like all the stuff that's here in the need to rank section, I think these are all the stuff that are worth using. Obviously, there's going to be some stuff that is like significantly better than other stuff, but that's how it's going to work. So just to give you guys a little bit of information, the stuff that's going to be in S and A tier, in my opinion, the stuff that's in S and A tier are like so much better than everything else that I actually have no Pokemon that are ranked in B tier, just because I think the gap between the stuff in A and S is so much better than the stuff in like C, D, and F tier. Also, I don't start necessarily like ranking Pokemon until I get to the C tier area. So whenever I like bring up a Pokemon in F and D tier, it's not necessarily like in the order of what I think's the best in F or D tier. It's just kind of like a hodgepodge of like all of them are kind of around the same level. They all have like a certain niche, so they're just kind of like down here. But yeah, I'll start ranking them once we get to around C tier. So going on ahead, me personally, I would say that probably like Superior is down here in F tier. Superior is one of those Pokemon where it does get the ability Contrary, so it uses its move Leaf Storm, where in most instances on most Pokemon it would lower their special attack by 2 stages, but because of its ability Contrary, it raises its special attack 2 stages every time it uses Leaf Storm. The issue with Superior is that it doesn't have like the most amazing base stats, so the thing is you need a few turns to kind of get it going with all the stat boost, but with how fastly paced this format is, it's going to really struggle. But it does have a certain niche. There was, I think, someone that did use it to a little bit success, I think over in Europe, so I think it was worth a mention, but not a great Pokemon. The next one in F tier I would say is Mimikyu. Mimikyu is one of those Pokemon where in previous years it's found success. So I know that in like 2019, I think it actually got top 4 at Worlds, and that was like the second to last restricted format that we did, the last one being 2022. So it has had success in the past, but the fact that it is competing with another Fairy Ghost type in Flutter Mane, I think really devalues it a little bit. And then also its ability Disguise got nerfed as the generations went on, because how Disguise used to work back in the day is that when Mimikyu took a hit, it didn't take any damage on the first hit, and then you could get hit on the second turn, and then it could carry Focus Sash, so regardless, Mimikyu would always survive a hit from being doubled up by 2 Pokemon, where now that's different because with Disguise, when it gets hit, it takes a little bit of damage, and the fact, again, that it is competing with Flutter Mane does hurt it a lot. I'll put Okidogi down here. Okidogi does get access to the move, or not move, the ability Guard Dog. So it gets actually +1 attack, I think, if it's intimidated. So it makes it actually a pretty nice counter to Incineroar, but it doesn't make it a great counter to like a lot of the other stuff in the format. Like there's a lot of stuff that could one-shot it and blow it up, and then plus the fact that it is 4 times weak to Psychic moves is a problem, because a lot of Cali Shadow have been starting to run like Psychic Expanding Force, and then Psyshock. So I think it belongs here down in F tier. Hitmontop's another Pokemon that I think belongs down here. Hitmontop, it won Worlds actually back in 2016, and it does get access to the move Fake Out, but more importantly, it does get access to the move Wide Guard. Wide Guard, especially in restricted formats, is kind of a big deal because some of these restricted Pokemon have really, really powerful spread attacks. So, like, obviously there's both Calyrex forms with, like, Astro Barrage and then Glacial Lance, and then there's Precipice Blades from Groudon, there's Water Spout from Kyogre, plus Origin Pulse. So the fact it does have access to Wide Guard is a big deal. Plus it has the ability Intimidate, but there is a much better Fake Out Intimidate user in Incineroar, so I think it belongs down here. But I figured it was worth a mention just because it does have access to Wide Guard. Sableye, I think, belongs down here. Sableye, it has like a certain niche. It does get the ability Prankster. It actually could pair up really well with Groudon because Sableye not only gets access to the move Sunny Day, which just helps Groudon out a lot, it also gets the move Gravity. For those of you that don't know how it works, Gravity, it essentially like brings all Pokemon that are flying types down to ground level so they could be hit by ground moves, and then it also makes your moves more accurate, so then Groudon's Precipice Blades actually become 100% accurate. The thing is, however, Sableye is really, really frail, so before it kind of could like do anything, it can get knocked out if you're not very careful, so I think that's why it should be down here. Klefki is another Pokemon. It's a Steel Fairy type, so it does have the best type combination in the game. It's mostly used to set up screens. However, there's a much better screens user in Grimmsnarl, so yeah, that's essentially why it's down in F tier. There's just a better screens user. But the fact it does have the best typing is kind of nice. Going on ahead, I would say normal Cantonia Raichu belongs down here. It does have the ability Lightning Rod, so it actually makes it a really nice switch-in on Miraidon teams because it could just kind of soak up the Electric-type attacks, which can be devastating in a lot of circumstances. However, a really smart Miraidon player, if they were to run into Raichu, they just wouldn't click those Electric-type moves because even then, Draco Meteor from Miraidon and Dazzlebeam still hurt really, really bad. And Raichu also overall is very frail, so they could catch it on a switch-in. The thing is, Raichu does get access to the move Fake Out and Endeavor. However, in order for Endeavor to actually be like pretty effective against teams, you kind of have to be able to outspeed the opposing teams. But now with how fast like some of the stuff is in the formats, it just kind of invalidates the Endeavor a lot of the times with Raichu. So yeah, I think it belongs down here, but has a niche. Pawmont's down here as well. Pawmont, it's just competing with other really, really strong electric types. It does get access to the move Revival Blessing, which is unique to it, but the fact that it is competing with like Iron Hands, which is just way better than it, and stuff like Raging Bolt, it's kind of bad news bears for it, but with Revival Blessing, it is kind of like a cool, unique move, but I don't think it justifies necessarily using it over some of the other stuff, but figured it was worth a mention. Going on ahead, I think Brute Bonnet's down here. Brute Bonnet, it's pretty much just a downgraded version of Amoonguss. Amoonguss, it's a bit bulkier Amoonguss, and then to add on top that Brute Bonnet, it just has a worse typing than Amoonguss. Brute Bonnet, essentially like, with Dark and Grass, it's weak not only to fire types, but it's also weak to Fairy, it's weak to Fighting, it's weak to Flying type moves, it's weak to Poison type moves, it's just weak to too many common things to kind of make use of it. With that being said, it does pair nicely with like Groudon and Koraidon, just because of its photosynthesis ability, but all in all, if you're going to use Brute Bonnet, you might as well just use Amoonguss. Going on ahead, I think Hisuian Arcanine deserves to be down here. Hisuian Arcanine is competing with, obviously, Incineroar as a fire type with Intimidate, plus Incineroar gets access to Fake Out where Hisuian Arcanine doesn't. Hisuian Arcanine, it's found success in National Dex formats, so like it found success in Regulation D, and I think, what was the Regulation E was after that? Man, the alphabet's really hard. But yeah, the fact it's competing with Incineroar as like a premier Intimidate fire type user, not great for it, but figured I'll give it a mention. Glimmora is another Pokemon. It's quad weak to ground type moves because of the poison rock typing. It does have a unique ability where it can set up toxic spikes, but in a format like this where it's so fast-paced, the toxic spikes really, in like the grand scheme of things, is not going to matter too much in most matches unless like the match for some reason is really, really slow. But with stuff doing so much damage in this format, it's kind of hard to justify placing it any higher. Alolan Raichu's in here. It gets the ability, I think it's called like, what's the name of its ability? It gets an ability, I'm forgetting the name, where essentially its speed is doubled when electric terrain is up. I'm sorry, I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, compare kind of nicely with Miraidon because, again, its speed is doubled. But the issue is why would you use Alolan Raichu over Iron Hands when Iron Hands gets his attack raised and Iron Hands also just has much better stats than it? But I figured I'll just kind of put it there. They function a little bit differently, so I figured it was worth the mention. But yeah, Alolan Raichu, even back in like 2017 on like those Tapu Koko teams, some people swore by it, but I didn't feel like it was that good even then in a format with like a much lower base power than this one. And in this format, it's just like it just gets outclassed by a lot of other electric types. Alolan Ninetales, I think, belongs in here. Alolan Ninetales, it doesn't like... I know some people will say it probably will pair well with Cali Ice. The thing is, however, Cali Ice, it already is so naturally bulky that you don't need Alolan Ninetales next to it. If anything, that would be kind of a wasted slot. I would say Alolan Ninetales pairs much better with like something like Kyurem White. Kyurem White, obviously, like its Blizzard will become 100% accurate, and then you could just put up Aurora Veil with Ninetales. But the problem is that Kyurem White as a restricted Pokemon is kind of middling, so it just makes Ninetales lose a little bit of value as well, because if you're going to run it, then you want to run it next to that. But Kyurem White is like, the restricted is not like amazing. So yeah, figured it was worth a mention, but I think it belongs down here. Chandelure belongs down here. Chandelure, it gets access to Flash Fire, so it's really nice as like a switch in on fire type attacks. Specifically, it's really nice, especially switching into like Ogerpon Hearthflame. However, switching it in on Incineroar is not amazing because, yes, you could soak up the fire-type attacks with Flash Fire, but with Chandelure having Ghost as part of its typing, it could just get knocked off by Incineroar the next turn, and you're just kind of in this constant state of switching it in and out and protecting it, and a really good player could just kind of call that switch pretty easily and then get a quick clean KO or do a lot of damage. But figured it was worth a mention. It also does get access to Haze, which is a really nice move because Dondozo Tatsugiri still is around, so it was worth a mention. Tyranitar belongs down here. Tyranitar could switch up the weather against Groudon, Kyogre, but and also Koraidon. I was forgetting the other one. But the issue is that it just flat out loses to all three of those Pokemon, even if it does switch out the weather. But figured I'll give it a mention. I know it. I think it got like top 16 at Worlds or top 16 at NAIC, but I think that was more so a result of the person that was using it just like piloted it really well and was a really good player rather than Tyranitar being super strong. So figured that it should be kind of thrown down here. I would say Iron Moth belongs down here. Iron Moth, the issue with it is that just like Lamora, it's quad weak to ground type moves. It does pair nicely on Sun teams. However, the issue is that it is competing with other really strong special attacking fire types like Chi-Yu, so it just makes it kind of hard to justify like ever using it over Chi-Yu. Plus the thing is, when it is on those Sun teams, it's not like its ability Quark Drive is activated, so you're kind of forced to run Booster Energy onto it. Yeah, I just think the value of it's a lot less than something like Chi-Yu, but figured it was worth a mention. Iron Treads belongs down here. It pairs kind of nicely with Miraidon, but I would say that its stats don't kind of match up or its stats aren't as well distributed as some of the other Paradox Pokemon that you could place next to Miraidon, but I think it did well in like the juniors divisions at Worlds. I think it got like second or first. It was somewhere in there, but yeah, I don't know. I just think, like, compared to other ground types, especially, like, Lando Eye and Ursaluna Blood Moon, it falls short. I understand that Iron Treads is a physical attacking ground type, but I feel like the value of physical attacking ground types has actually fallen as the years have progressed just because of Incineroar, where, obviously, with, like, Blood Moon and then Lando Eye, since they're special attacking ground types, the Intimidate from Incineroar is not going to affect them, and you could just pick up a clean KO back, where with Iron Treads, that's just not the case. But yeah, I figured it was worth a mention. I think Screamtail belongs in here. Screamtail, it's one of those Pokemon that it's like really annoying to deal with, but I don't want to say it's not good because it has won a regional before, but definitely in formats where the base power level is kind of lower, that's where Screamtail finds success. But obviously with a restricted format, I would say that's probably not going to be the case. It obviously gets access to moves like Encore and Disable, but I don't think that's enough for it to gain like enough value to place it any higher than here. I think Talonflame belongs down here. Talonflame is also another Pokemon that's really suffered from power creep. Did well back in 2016 on like the Big Six team, but obviously like its ability Gale Wings was nerfed since then. It's just competing with other fire types. It itself is not like that bulky, so it could die to pretty much neutral hits from a lot of the restricted Pokemon, or it's taken like 90%. I tried it out. It just, I don't know, it just feels like it falls short of a lot of the other Tailwind users, especially like Whimsicott and Tornadus, which are like the premier Tailwind users and are just flat out better than it. So yeah, I figured I'll just put it down here just because it is a physical attacking flying type as opposed to Tornadus, but I don't think that's going to be enough to kind of push it ahead. Going on ahead, just looking through, making sure I didn't miss anything. I think probably Jumpluff belongs down here. Jumpluff, it's kind of nice on some teams because of its ability Chlorophyll. I know that it did well in Regulation H on certain Sun teams, but with the fact that the power level of the format got a lot better, it just makes it kind of suffer a bit. Plus, again, there's other like sleep users that are just flat out better than it. Like Amoonguss, I understand Amoonguss functions a lot differently because obviously like it's not as fast as Jumpluff, but in a format where you need to put stuff to sleep, I think it's a lot better to just have a Pokemon that has a little bit more survivability. But yeah, there are also better Chlorophyll sleep users in the format, I would say, such as like Lilligant and also Venusaur. So I think it just belongs somewhere down here. I think I'm missing something. I think Drifbloom belongs down here. That's what I was missing. Oh no, where'd it go? I just lost it. Guys, help me find it. Where's the Drifbloom? Here it is. Okay. I had like a senior citizen moment there. Yeah, so Drifbloom, it pairs nicely with Indeedee just because you could put like a Psychic Seed on it, and then Drifbloom does get the ability Unburden. The biggest issue for Drifbloom, however, is that it is weak to both Calyrex forms and Miraidon, which is not amazing for it. It does get access to the move Will-O-Wisp, so you could use that to slow down Cali Ice, but there are some Cali Ice that do run Terra Fire, so it just kind of invalidates the Will-O-Wisp anyway. So yeah, but I figured it was worth a mention. Can set up Tailwind, does get access to Haze, can throw up Will-O-Wisp, but it's, in my opinion, more so of a nuisance to teams rather than like it actually being like amazing. So that's why it's kind of down here. I think to kind of finish off down here, I would say like a Rangaroo belongs down here. It's one of those Pokemon, I don't want to say it's gimmicky just because it has found success in the past, but for people that know how it functions, essentially what it does, it sets up Trick Room and then it clicks Instruct into its partner for it to use the same move twice. The thing is, however, is like it in of itself is not like a very strong individual piece. So like if you could just knock it out before it even sets up Trick Room, which is like not a big deal. Yeah, plus there's just better Psychic normal types right now in both Indeedee forms, so and also Farigiraf as well. So yeah, just it's kind of fallen from grace as the years have gone by. Going on ahead to D tier. So down here in D tier, I think I'll probably put like Thundurus. Thundurus, it's one of those Pokemon where like in prior years it found a lot of success. Like all time, it's probably considered the greatest electro type ever, but that obviously is going to change as the years go by just because it's gotten nerfed to the ground. It is kind of unique in the fact that it could like Eerie Impulse teams and like you could click Thunder Wave. It also gets access to both, I think, Sunny Day and Rain Dance. Or actually, does it get access to Sunny Day? I don't know. I don't remember. I think it does, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. So, yeah, but I don't know. It's just like compared to other electric types, it kind of loses a lot of value. but it is kind of unique. It can find success, I think, on the right team, but it is going to use like a lot. It needs a lot of support to kind of do that. This one might come as a bit of a shock to you guys if I could find it. Where is it? Annihilate. Before you get your pitchforks out, Annihilate, the biggest issue for it in this format, like obviously in, you know, like national dex formats and regional dex formats, is actually pretty strong, but the thing is with restricted formats, it underspeeds a lot of the restricted, so it's kind of forced to run like Choice Scarf with Final Gambit, making it very one-dimensional. It just like, outside of like running that Scarf set, it's just not like amazing with the other sets in the restricted format, so that's why it kind of falls down here. Plus having the weakness to like Kali Shadow and then Flutter Mane is not great for it, so that's why it's all the way down here. Going on ahead, what else is down here? I would say Gastrodon probably belongs down here. Gastrodon, it's one of my all-time favorite Pokemon. It is a really, really nice switch into Urshifu Rapid Strike. However, the issue is it suffers against a lot of the other Pokemon in the format. So, like, it has problems against Rillaboom and, like, Amoonguss, and then it just doesn't tank hits as well as it used to in the past, because, like, even against, you know, like, Cali Ice, where it takes Glacial Lance neutrally, like, even with a lot of investment, Gastrodon still takes over half with Glacial Lance if it's, like, you're not EV'd out the wazoo in defense and HP. So, yeah, it's just lost value as the years have gone by. But I really like Gastrodon. It has won Worlds in restricted formats before, back in 2022. But, yeah, my poor boy has suffered with, like, the addition of Rillaboom and the Ogre Ponds and all that. Going on ahead, Volcarona, I'd say, belongs down here. Volcarona, I think it got top 4 at Japanese Nationals. Volcarona, it's also one of my other Pokemon that's one of my all-time favorites. You guys know that I used it to get second in the Grand Challenge that just recently happened, but in this format, it loses a lot of value just because there's a better redirection fire-type user in Ogerpon Hearthflame, so Ogerpon Hearthflame gets access to Follow Me, which is objectively a better move than Rage Powder, because Rage Powder could be ignored by grass types. So Volcarona loses a little bit of value in this format. Obviously, you could run the Quiver Dance set, but again, with how fast-paced everything is, it's just like there's not enough turns for it to kind of get set up to really kind of get a stranglehold on the format. I would say, I was about to say Lando Eye. Thundurus T, that's what it is. Thundurus T, I think, belongs kind of somewhere in here. It gets access to Wild Bolt Storm, which is a really great move. However, it's kind of like pigeonholed on what teams it belongs on. I think it works really, really well on like rain teams, but then anything outside of that, it just really suffers. Plus, again, it is competing with other really strong electric types. So, yeah, it just like, I don't know. It definitely has a hard time with just competing with those things. Going on ahead, I think Iron Jugulus belongs in here. Iron Jugulus, I think, is actually a little bit underrated. Some people kind of look at it and then they're like, you know, like compared to the other Paradox Pokemon, it's not as good, which, yes, that's true. But the fact it does get access to like Snarl, Tailwind, and Air Slash is pretty nice because it can pin Cali Shadow a lot and force it to kind of Terra type. Even if that Cali Shadow, let's say, has like Covert Cloak on it where its special attack won't be lowered, it still is taking a 4x super effective Snarl, which from a Pokemon that has Stab on it. So thought it was worth a mention, but I think it belongs kind of somewhere down here. Galarian Moltres belongs down here. I think it actually won a regional back in Reg G. It also is like a decent counter to Cali Shadow, just because it gets Fiery Dance and then access to like other dark type moves. Plus it has really great special defense, so like Cali Shadow's not going to KO it anytime soon. But it does really struggle against Miraidon and does struggle against Cali Ice, which are, in my opinion, the 2 best restricted Pokemon. So I think it belongs kind of somewhere down here. Indeedee Male belongs down here. It just gets outclassed by other normal Psychic types like Indeedee Female and then Farigiraf. Obviously, it functions differently, but I think as far as like a premier Psychic Surge user, just Indeedee Female is better. It's a lot bulkier, gets access to Follow Me, so yeah, figured I'll put it down here, figured I'll give it a mention, but not amazing. I think Sneasler belongs down here. Sneasler, it was amazing in Regulation H. That's not going to be the case in Reg G, however. Again, like, there's a lot of Kali Shadow now that are just running Psychic-type moves that could just blow this thing up in one turn. It does still have access to Unburden and all that stuff, but it's going to really struggle in this format. It's just a little too frail. Yeah, just all in all, I think it's, like, not amazing. I think Regidraco belongs down here. Regidraco, it does a lot of damage. That is something that I think is noteworthy. However, it in of itself, it's very kind of one-dimensional in the way that plays. It's kind of meant to do like a lot of damage, but obviously it being like weak to Kali Ice and then weak to Miraidon doesn't help it. So that's why it has this placement down here. I think regular Ogerpon belongs down here. It's just competing with obviously like its other counterparts. The other Ogerpon forms are just better than regular Ogerpon, just because they do have that secondary typing, which gives them stab to an extra move, and then also it's competing with Rillaboom. It does get Defiant, which is nice, but like I don't think it's enough to place it any higher. I think Wo-Chien belongs down here. Again, competing just with better grass types. It did get, I don't know if it was top 8 or top 4 at NAIC, but I don't know, like it kind of sits there, and like, yeah, it soaks up hits and it supports a team very nicely, but once it kind of gets knocked out, then the other teammates kind of start falling apart, or you could just do the opposite and just KO the partner Pokemon, then leave Wo-Chien towards the end. So yeah, it doesn't feel amazing to me, but figured it was worth a mention just because it did have that high placement. Ting-Lu belongs down here. It's actually a really nice counter to Miraidon. I will give Ting-Lu that much. But again, it is competing with other ground types in the format that are just kind of stronger than it. And then Ting-Lu, it just, because it does have dark ground as a typing, like it just pairs very awkwardly with a lot of the other restricted Pokemon because it kind of overlaps with some of its type weaknesses. So yeah, just figured I'll put it down here. What was the other thing? I think Kingambit belongs down here. Kingambit, a lot of people, like, I don't know, in theory, it sounds like something that could be like a really nice counter to Kali Shadow. However, the biggest issue with it is that, yes, on paper it looks like it's a great counter, but in actual like practice and practicality, I've noticed it actually has issues against it. Just because a lot of the time Kali Shadow will like Terra type and then just kind of like do a lot of damage. And then a lot of the Kali Shadow are paired next to a redirection user. And obviously, like, those redirection users sometimes are Clefairy, but I feel like that's on a weaker construction of a Kali Shadow team. So if it's like a Kali Shadow that's next to a Moongus, then you could run into a lot of trouble with Kingambit, but figured it was worth a mention just because, like, some people believe in it. I personally don't. But, yeah. Gothitelle belongs down here. It does have a unique ability in Shadow Tag, so it can trap people on the field. However, the issue is that even though it could trap Pokemon on the field, it in of itself doesn't do enough damage, and I also don't think it supports the team well enough to like find success in a format like this, but who knows, maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, Gothitelle, it's like, it's cool, it's got like a unique ability, but again, it struggles a little bit. Basculegion belongs in here. You guys know me, I love Basculegion as well. It was one of the Pokemon that I also used to get second in the Grand Challenge, but yeah, it just like, I don't know, when you start comparing it to other water types like Urshifu Rapid Strike, it just makes it hard to justify using it. Does get Swift Swim, which is really great, but I don't know, it kind of falls off in this format. Latias, and where's Latios? Where are they? Right here. They're actually on like this team construction with Zamazenta. I think they in of themselves are actually not as strong as some people might think. Again, they are weak to both Calyrex forms and Miraidon, which is like a big negative for them. And it's just like they get outsped by a lot. They struggle against Chien-Pao. They struggle against Fluttermane. So it just makes it kind of tough to use them right now. But some people argue that they're good. Figured I'll give it a mention. Where is it? Am I blind? There it is. Arcaludon, I think, belongs down here. Arcaludon, it's one of those Pokemon that, like, again, had a lot of success in Regulation H, but it's going to be kind of a different story this format just because The thing that made it so successful in Regulation H is obviously its stamina ability, but now since you have Urshifu running around, which just ignores stat changes with its signature move, it just kind of devalues Arcaludon a lot. Plus, Arcaludon doesn't have like the greatest special defense, and then in a format where you have just powerhouses like Miraidon and Chi-Yu and, you know, like Kali Shadow running around, it just kind of takes away a lot from it. Down here is also Lando T. This one is going to be a shock to a lot of people. Lando T, for like a long time, was kind of the king of VGC, but as the years have gone by, it's gotten a little bit worse. Because again, with like Incineroar being added, it devalued it, and it kind of increased the value of special attacking ground types. But the fact it's also weak to like Urshifu and then Kali Ice just really hurts it a lot. But figured it was worth a mention. It's had success in the past. I think if you are going to run it, like maybe like a choice band set would actually be the best, just to kind of increase the damage output. But then you run into a situation where it's going to start underspeeding a lot of stuff. So like, I don't know. It's just kind of, it's there, but I think its counterpart in Lando I is just better. So yeah, I think Serena belongs down here. Serena, it actually has the ability to block priority moves with its ability Queenly Majesty, but just compared to other grass types, it really struggles. I think it also gets Sweet Veil, which is another kind of cool ability where it stops like stuff like Spore, but it in and of itself is just kind of like a weak individual piece, so I don't think it justifies being put any higher. Porygon 2's down here. Porygon 2, I love it. It's one of my favorite Pokemon as well, but again, it just like compared to other Trick Room users like Farigiraf and like Kali Ice, it just kind of falls short of them. Plus the fact that like, I don't know, it's weak to Urshifu. It really doesn't help it. That's going to be like a reoccurring theme with a lot of the Pokemon if you couldn't tell. But yeah, so I think this is a very fair placement for it. I think Cresselia also belongs down here. Again, there's just better Trick Room users. The difference between it and Porygon 2 and why I think Cresselia may be a little bit better is that Crest does have access to Lunar Blessing, which is a nice move, but it's weak to Kali Shadow, it's weak to Flutter Mane, it's weak to Urshifu Single Strike, it's weak to Incineroar, so it kind of belongs somewhere down here. Where is it? Gouging Fire, I think, belongs in this tier, like down here in D tier. It just, again, is competing with other fire types like Incineroar, like Chi-Yu. It does do well, I think, on like Zamazenta teams. I know like the big one that people are using on Zamazenta teams is like Entei, but I think also Gouging Fire could be nice on those constructions too. But yeah, I think it belongs somewhere down here. Where's the next one? Where's Roaring Moon? That's what I'm looking for. Did I not put it on here? Wait, hold on. Let me go through. Here it is. Oh my goodness. Man, I'm like, it should be getting easier as the list is going by, but I just like keep missing these things. Yeah, Roaring Moon belongs down here. It's quad weak to fairy types. It does get access to knockoff, which could be nice for like Kali Shadow and then Kali Ice, but again, it's like weak to Kali Ice and it's also weak to Urshifu. So it places it down here. Dragapult belongs down here. Weak to both Calyrex forms, weak to Miraidon. Yeah, not really much more to say about it. I think Maushold belongs down here as well. Maushold, I think it actually pairs up really nicely with Kali Shadow, just because it does have Friend Guard like Clefairy has, but the difference is that with Maushold is that it is immune to other Kali Shadows, where Clefairy is not. With that being said, could it do anything back to Kali Shadow? Not really, but I don't know. I figured it was kind of worth a mention just because like it is a normal type that you could switch in on opposing Calyrex, Astral Barrage, but yeah, I don't think all in all it's going to be amazing. Let's say Umbreon belongs down here. Umbreon, it's one of those Pokemon where like it got second at the 2019 World Championships, and I think it got top 4 at a regional in Reg G. It's one of those Pokemon that it like as an individual piece, would I say it's strong? I would say it's kind of middling, but I think it works really well within a system. But as an individual piece, it doesn't really stack up to some of the other Pokemon. I think Sandy Shocks belongs in here. Sandy Shocks, it's one of those Pokemon where, like, I don't believe in it, but I know Ryoto Tsubu, the 2017 World Champion, has been using it on his teams, and he's found actually some success with it. So I figured it was worth a mention. Zapdos belongs down here. Zapdos, again, competing with other electric types, so not amazing. Regieleki belongs down here. Got Day 2 at Worlds, which is worth a mention, but when you start comparing it to other electric types like Raging Bolt, it's just not nearly on, like, the same level of, you know, dominance that Raging Bolt's on. Plus, Regieleki, it's kind of limited to only electric type moves. You could run Terra Blast on it, like Terra Ice, but I don't know, if, like, a really smart opponent could kind of read into that and then, like, call your bluff. I'd say Venusaur belongs down here. It's a decent chlorophyll user. It did find success in 2022 on, like, that Rinya Sun team with, like, a variation of it, but we're also not in 2022. We're in a brand new format, but it has found success in the past, so I figured it was worth a mention. Suicune belongs in here. It's a really, really bulky water type. It could set up Tailwind. It could use Snarl. It gets access to Icy Wind. Really great support. Yeah, but I think just, again, like, when you start stacking it against some other water types, it just kind of falls short, especially of, like, Urshifu. Bronzong's another really cool Pokemon. It won Worlds in 2016, so figured it was worth a mention, but again, when you start comparing it to other Trick Room users, it kind of falls short, but it does get access to Levitate, so, like, you could maybe pair it next to, like, regular form Ursaluna, and then, like, set up Trick Room and then start Earthquaking with regular form Ursaluna, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel that there's just better Trick Room users out there. Electabuzz belongs down here. Electabuzz, I think it got top 16 at NAIC on, like, a hard Trick Room team. It, too, also found success in Reg H, but it's just going to start to struggle in this format because there's other better, like, Follow Me users in the Ogerpon forms, so yeah, I think it works on, like, very specific teams, but it's not very splashable. Snorlax belongs in here. Snorlax, it actually gets kind of this cool niche where it could click, like, Yawn into Pokemon, and the fact it also is immune to Astral Barrage is pretty nice. One of the things that found a lot of success back at Worlds in 2022, and in fact won Worlds in 2022, was Gastrodon, which I did mention before. Where is Gastrodon? It is... Oh, man. Did I miss it? I thought we did get... It's right here. Oh, man. Yeah, Gastrodon back at Worlds in 2022 essentially will click, like, Yawn into Pokemon for switch-ins and outs with it, where Snorlax could kind of fit that same role where it's immune to Astral Barrage, and you could just start clicking Yawn and stuff, so figured it was worth a mention. It might even be worthy of actually being in C tier. It was one of the few Pokemon in this tier that I thought could maybe move up, but we haven't found success from it yet, so I figured I'll just have it down here, but worth a mention. Overquill belongs in here. It's a pretty decent Swiss Swim user. It did get top 8 at NAIC, but the thing is it's very, very frail, so it just kind of could get KO'd by, like, a gust of wind, which is a problem, but figured it was worth a mention. Magmar falls in the same boat as Electabuzz, so not going to go too deep into it. Hatterene, I think, belongs in here. It finds success in hard Trick Room teams, but it doesn't really find success outside of that. So, yeah, there was a hard Trick Room team that did get top 8 at Worlds this year, but it didn't have Hatterene on it, so I just want to make that very clear. But if you want to run a variation of that team with Hatterene, like, go for it. I think... Is that everyone? I think Iron Bundle belongs down here. Some people might argue that Iron Bundle belongs in C tier. The thing that I have an issue with Iron Bundle is that its main water type attack and Hydro Pump is very unreliable. It just seems to miss at, like, the most crucial moments. So, yeah, I think it belongs in D tier. It does pair nicely with Miraidon. You could click Icy Wind with it, but we haven't seemed to find success with it, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact it just lacks consistency in its move choices, so it's kind of down here. I think Walking Wake belongs in here. The reason why Walking Wake's down here is that it works on very specific teams, specifically Sun teams with, like, Koraidon or Groudon, but outside of those teams, it's really, really tough to use. And then I would say Gallade also belongs down here. Gallade, it did also get top 8 at Worlds this year. on that hard Trick Room team, but it falls in kind of the same boat as Hatterini, where like it functions on those hard Trick Room teams, but anything outside of it is going to be asking a little too much of it. But did get top 8 at Worlds, so worth a mention. All right, now we're going to get into the section where we start to kind of rank stuff. So right at the bottom of C tier, I actually think that Men Xiao belongs there. If I could find it, where is it? Oh no. Here it is. Oh. So it belongs right at the bottom of C tier. It actually gets access both to Fake Out and Wide Guard, just like Hitmontop does, but the difference is that it's a little bit faster than Hitmontop. Plus, also, unlike Hitmontop, it can't get intimidated because it has the ability Inner Focus. It pairs really nicely with Kali Shadow, so I thought it was worth a mention. Next on the list is going to be Lily Cole. It's going to be just both Lilligant and then Torkoal. I'm just going to pair them together because they work together as a core. You guys, I'm pretty sure, know how Lily Cole works. Lilligant, it collects Sleep Powder after you into Torkoal. After you, obviously, allows you to use Eruption before everyone else, and then you can Sleep Powder your opponents. I think after them comes, like, the Swords of Justice Paradox Pokemon. So I always forget their names. I'm not going to bother mentioning their names, but I think they were worth a mention. Iron Leaves. Where is it? Iron Leaves is right here. It did, I think it got first on the latter one of the seasons on like a Miraidon team. In fact, all of them pair really well with Miraidon, but Iron Leaves probably pairs up the best with it just because it doesn't necessarily share... Well, actually, no, it does share the weakness of Ice-type. What am I saying? Scrap whatever I just said. That was completely wrong. But they all pair nicely with Miraidon. You could slap a Life Orb on any of them. Honestly, I think also Expert Belt would be another good move, but yeah, I would put them here. I think Entei kind of belongs in this area of like C-tier Pokemon. It got top 4 at Worlds, but the thing is, in order to like run it well, you have to kind of put it next to... you have to put it next to Chen Pao and next to Zamazenta, because any teams outside of that, it just really struggles working on. But yeah, worth a mention. Gets Inner Focus, so it just ignores Intimidate, which is a big deal. I think Weezing's next. The thing is, I don't have Galarian Weezing. Just pretend that normal Weezing is both just Cantonian Weezing and Galarian Weezing. I couldn't find the PNG down here, and I was not going to search for it. It pairs really well with Calyrex. There was a team that I think that got top 16 at Worlds, where it was like Galarian Weezing and Calyrex. Obviously, it has the ability to like turn off other Pokemon abilities, which I think is a big deal in this format just because some of the abilities are so broken, and that could really kind of like change the pacing of a game. So, figured I'll put it here. I think regular form Ursaluna belongs to be in this tier. It's really good on Trick Room teams. It pairs really nicely with Lunala, actually. I don't think it pairs as well with, like, Cali Ice, but with Lunala, I think it could pair really nicely. It could do a lot of damage. If you aren't prepared for it, it could just blow up your entire team. So keep that in mind. I would say Indeedee Female is next. Indeedee Female pairs really nicely with Calyrex, specifically Calyrex Shadow. Obviously, you could set up Psychic Terrain, allowing Calyrex Shadow to use Expanding Force. It could set up Trick Room. It could click Follow Me. It's relatively bulky, so pretty nice to have. I think Grimmsnarl belongs in here. Grimmsnarl, again, one of my favorite Pokemon, but in this format, I think it just, like, struggles to kind of keep up. Even though it's, like, a pretty good screens user, it's, like, overall decent-ish, but the issue with Grimmsnarl is that sometimes, like, you set up one of the screens but get blown up before you get set up the second one, so it becomes kind of a premier target a lot of the times, which is not great, but figured I'll put it in here. I think Smeargle belongs in here. Smeargle, it functions also well on, like, Cali Shadow teams. I think it also could function well on, like, Kyogre teams if, like, I don't know, like, there's an idea that I've been thinking about where you run, I think, Eject Pact on it with Moody, and then you set up Trick Room with a Pokemon next to it. So you set up Trick Room with, like, Farigiraf, and then, obviously, like, you fake out with Smeargle, Moody activates, then you could switch out with Eject Pact, and then bring in, like, Kyogre, and then start Water Spouting everything. But that's kind of, like, very specific to, like, that idea, but I think that could be kind of played around a bit. But, yeah, figured I'd mention it. It did get top 4 at NAIC, I think, on Eduardo's team, who won Worlds in 2022. So if he thinks it's good, then it probably has like some utility. I think Golden Go belongs down here. One of the things about this format, which is kind of unique, is that steel types aren't as necessary on teams as they are in other formats, just because like the Pokemon are so absurdly strong that I don't want to say type chartings get kind of thrown out the window in this format, but they don't hold as much value as they do in other formats, so it's not as necessary to have a steel type on the team. With that being said, it is Golden Go. It is a good Pokemon. It did get top 8 at Worlds, so put it here. It is a nice counter to Amoonguss with good as gold, so yeah. I think Ditto belongs in this area. Ditto, it actually is really decent in restricted formats. Any formats outside of that, like regional decks or national decks formats, it kind of sucks. But the thing is, it has the ability to transform into other Pokemon, and then you could slap it on a Choice Scarf, so your opponent could get like +2 with their Cali Shadow, but then you switch in your Ditto, and then you transform into it, and then you could actually win a game off of that. The problem is that when you do transform, it is limited in the amount of times it could click its move. It only could click specific moves 5 times as opposed to like the normal amount of PP that those moves have. So I figured I'll put it down here. I think Dragonite belongs in here. It also got top 8 at Worlds. I think it pairs really nicely with like Chen Pao, obviously. The fact it is weak though to Cali Ice and Miraidon does devalue it a little bit, but Dragonite, it actually has gotten better as the years have gone by, so figured I'll put it here. Up next, I think, is Tatsugiri and then Dondozo. I think some people might feel that this is a little bit too low for them on the list. The thing is, however, with Tatsugiri Dondozo is that there are very clear ways to kind of counter it. There is clear Smogamogus, there is Haze users out in the format, and then the other thing is that some of the Pokemon are so strong that even when it does get the Omni boost, it still could get like blown up in 2 turns. With that being said, if you aren't prepared for it and then you aren't careful, it can beat your team. I know it got top 16 at Worlds on like that Calyrex team with Galarian Weezing on it, but yeah, it's like a decent Pokemon, or decent pair of Pokemon, but I wouldn't place it any higher than this. So yeah. I think Iron Valiant belongs in here. It got 2nd at Worlds, which is a big deal. The biggest issue that I have with Iron Valiant is that in order to make it work, you kind of have to play like perfectly with it. The thing is, it's very, very frail, so it could get KO'd by neutral attacks a lot of the time, even if you do have investment. So in order to like find success with it, you have to click the right move every single time. With that being said, that's probably the case with every single Pokemon, but some of the moves that Valiant does get access to can be very disruptive to teams, so it gets access to like Encore, Disable, Y-Guard, stuff like that. So I figured it was worth a mention. Ogerpon Wellspring, I think, belongs in here. I don't think it's as strong. Oop, I just hit the mic. I'm so sorry about that. I don't think it's as strong as like Ogerpon Hearthflame and Ogerpon Cornerstone. Also, the fact that it is competing with Urshifu as one of the premier water types doesn't help it. And then the fact it's also competing with the other Ogerpons and Rillaboom as the premier grass type also doesn't help it as well. So I figured I'll put it here. But yeah. Finally, I think Pelipper belongs down here. I know Pelipper is on like... I know that it got 2nd at Worlds. I know that it got 1st at NAIC. The thing about Pelipper is that it works really well within a system on a team. Like, it pairs nicely with Urshifu Rapid Strike, but the thing is, it's very kind of... I don't know, it feels very limited in the way you could build around it. The fact it's quad weak to electric doesn't help it, and then the other thing is, as an individual piece, it's actually not that strong. It works really well within a system, so I think that's why it belongs all the way down here in C tier. I certainly would not put it in A tier. But yeah. I mentioned this earlier on in the video, but I think from this point on, there's like a huge gap between the Pokemon that are in S and A tier as compared to everything else. So we're not going to place anything in B tier just to like show you guys kind of the difference in strength levels, but yeah. So right at the bottom of A tier, I think I would actually put Ursaluna Blood Moon. It won the first regional in Regulation G on that Miraidon team, but the thing is, Ursaluna Blood Moon, it also pairs really nicely with Cali Ice. It did really well on like the ladder. It got, I think, top 16 at NAIC on like that Electabuzz team, so Yeah, Ursaluna, it's a really strong Pokemon. Its signature move is really great. I think it's deserving of A tier. I don't know why I placed it in B tier. I can't read apparently, but yeah, really strong Pokemon. The thing is though, outside of like those Miraidon and then Cali Ice teams, it doesn't really pair as well with some of the other restricted, so it does limit it kind of in like the constructions that it's on. So that's why it's down here at the bottom of A tier. I think Iron Hands belongs in A tier. It won Worlds. It pairs really, really well with Miraidon. It could hit like a truck. Even if you don't have it paired next to Miraidon, it still has great stats. One of the unique things about Iron Hands is that it actually does a good job at countering Urshifu. It's one of the few Pokemon in the game that could actually counter both Urshifu forms, because obviously having like access to fighting as an ability could beat the Urshifu Dark form, and then having access to Electric, not as an ability, as a type, that's what I meant to say. As a typing, it could also beat Urshifu Rapid Strike, plus it has great natural defense. Works really well with Miraidon, as I mentioned before. I think it also works kind of well with Terapagos as well. Not to the same extent as Miraidon, but pretty good Pokemon. I think it won Japanese Nationals and finished second in NAIC. Don't quote me on that. I can't seem to remember some things today, so... but yeah. I think Ogerpon Cornerstone belongs in here. It pairs well with a lot of the restricted Pokemon. Having access to Ivy Cudgel makes it really kind of like nice into Incineroar. Access to Follow Me is a great move as well. Yeah, just all in all, good Pokemon. I think this is a very fair placement for it. I would put Farigiraf down here. Farigiraf, really great Trick Room user. It also won Worlds as well. It won the first regional as well, too. Can block priority moves. That's a really big deal with its ability Armor Tail. It just supports a team really nicely with like Helping Hand and stuff. It also gets access to Foul Play, which increases in value in restricted formats, just because a lot of the Pokemon, even if they aren't utilizing their physical attack stat, even then a lot of them still have very high physical attack stats, so Foul Play could do like a surprising amount of damage to some stuff. So I think it's very deserving of like being kind of near the bottom of A tier, but definitely an A tier Pokemon. I think that Fluttermane belongs in here. It, I think, got second at NAIC, and then it got top 4 at Worlds. I don't know how it did at Japanese Nationals. I think it might have won, but don't quote me on that. Yeah, Fluttermane, it's just a really good Pokemon. It has a Ghost Fairy type, so there's not necessarily a type in the game that could resist its Ghost and Fairy type attacks. But it does get access to Thunder Wave. It does get access to Icy Wind. Just really good Pokemon. I think all in all, it's really nice to add on a team. Pairs well with Sun teams, but you don't necessarily have to run it on Sun teams. It could just, all in all, it pairs really nicely with a lot of the restricteds. I think Lando I belongs in here. It got second at Worlds. It, in my opinion, I think is the best special attacking ground type in the format. Its move, Sand Shear Storm, it just does loads of damage. Just the one issue is that it's inaccurate, so you're kind of forced to run it next to a Pokemon that could set up rain, like Rain Dance, Tornadus, or Thundurus, or like Pelipper or something, but really strong Pokemon. If you're not careful, it could just blow up your team and like chunk Pokemon very quickly, especially if it's running like a Choice Scarf set where it could just outspeed everything. I think Whimsicott belongs in here. Whimsicott also won Worlds. Really good Tailwind user. I think it's the best, or not the best, the second best Tailwind user in the format after Tornadus. The thing about it is that Whimsicott's typing defensively is not amazing, so that's why I have it a little bit lower than Tornadus, but does get access to moves like Encore. It's really disruptive. Could be, like in the right hands, it could be used very effectively and could be like really annoying to teams, so I think this is a very fair placement for it. Next up's Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu is the second best Treasures of Ruin Pokemon. I think that's what they're called. It does a lot of damage. It pairs really nicely with Cali Shadow and then Fluttermane. If I were to use it, I would say probably the best sets are like Focus Sash or Choice Scarf on it. I don't think Safety Goggles is as great on it in this format just because it is kind of frail and it could get threatened to be knocked out pretty quickly. So that's why I think the Focus Sash is good, just because it gives you survivability, and then the Choice Scarf is good because it allows you to outspeed stuff like Zamazenta, which could usually threaten KOs. And plus you don't want to blow your Terra type on it like turn 1 of the game. So yeah, good Pokemon, really, really solid. I think Chen Pao belongs in here. Chen Pao, is really, really good on Zamazenta teams. It pairs really nicely with Urshifu Rapid Strike just because it lowers the defenses of other Pokemon with its ability. It's a good Ice Dark typing. I remember back in 2016, Weavile was the premier Ice Dark type, but obviously like Chien-Pao is just like a massive upgrade from it. So like it's basically just a much, much better version of Weavile. And I remember how strong Weavile was in those formats. Yeah, Chien-Pao, really great Pokemon. Just really nice to have on a team. It pairs nicely with a lot of the stuff. Up next, I think, is Tornadus. In my eyes, it's the best Tailwind setter in the format, mostly because not only could it set up Tailwind, but also, unlike Whimsicott, it does have access to set up both weathers rather than one. Whimsicott could set up Sunny Day, but it cannot use Rain Dance, where Tornadus could use both weathers, and it could be really disruptive towards teams. Plus, the other thing about Tornadus is that its signature move, Bleak Wind Storm, is just much more powerful than like Whimsicott's Moonblast, and it could do a lot of damage to teams. Tornadus, its move obviously is like super effective against things like Urshifu, Rillaboom, Ogerpon, Hearthflame. Plus, it also outspeeds Ogerpon, Hearthflame by 1 point. So just like it not only could set up Tailwind and be disruptive, but it also could do a lot of damage if you're not careful, even if it's like a bulkier set. So yeah, I think it's the best Tailwind setter in the format. I think Amoonguss is next. Amoonguss is one of those Pokemon that, even as the years have gone by and power creep has gotten worse and worse, it's always just remained so unbelievably consistent. I think all time, like obviously a lot of people say Incineroar is the greatest competitive Pokemon ever, which I agree with, but I think Amoonguss, you could argue it's probably the second greatest competitive Pokemon ever, just because of how consistent it's been over the years with its ability to use Spore and Rage Powder. It just like any format, doesn't matter if it's regional, national decks, or restricted formats, it's always good. It got second at Worlds this past year, won Worlds in 2023. Really, really good Pokemon. It's good on basically any team other than like Miraidon teams, just because obviously you can't click Spore when you're in electric terrain, but pairs just well with a lot of the stuff, especially Cali Ice, especially Cali Shadow, Zamazenta. There's like not enough good things I could say about this Pokemon. It's really, really good. Going on ahead, I think Raging Bolt belongs in here. Raging Bolt, in my opinion, is the second best Electric type in the format, obviously after Miraidon. It's just really good. It's really bulky. In my eyes, I think it's the best Paradox Pokemon, even more so than Fluttermane. If you want to make the argument for Fluttermane, I get it. Like, Fluttermane's really, really good. But Raging Bolt, just like its stat distribution is insane. Its signature move in Thunderclap is also insane. It's just like, it's really, really strong. It could be used, like I know a lot of people use Booster Energy on it. Me personally, I think like an Assault Vest bulky set with like Electro Web and Snarl is really, really nice because it could be disruptive to teams. And because it has such a naturally high special attack stat, even though those moves are low base power, you could still actually do surprising amounts of damage with it. But yeah, Raging Bolt, it's like probably like the sixth best non-restricted in the format. Going on ahead, I would say Ogerpon Hearthflame belongs in here. It won Worlds this past year. It has such a unique typing in fire and grass. Is it as good as a redirection user as like Amoonguss, even though it gets Follow Me? Probably not, just because it's not as bulky as Amoonguss, but like the thing that's so nice about Ogerpon is that it can be used defensively and offensively in the same Pokemon, and because of its unique typing, it can hit a lot of stuff for neutral or super effective damage with fire type and grass type attacks. So yeah, I think it's like probably one of the 5 best non-restricteds in the format. Really strong. Its Terra type form is really strong as well. It gets plus attack. Could do crazy amounts of damage. So yeah, really good Pokemon. I think Rillaboom belongs in like probably the 4th spot. I would say it's the 4th best non-restricted Pokemon. Rillaboom was so strong in 2022, in fact, that they actually nerfed its move Grassy Glide going into this generation. Even with the nerf, the fact that it could like switch up terrain and be disrupted to Miraidon teams is a big deal. It does loads of damage with Wood Hammer and Grassy Glide. It gets access to Fake Out. It has like a decent amount of speed, but the thing is, you could also run like... the thing is, I think a lot of people get locked into running the Assault Vest set on Rillaboom, which I think is the best set, but there are other sets on it that are pretty decent as well. Like I know a Leftovers Rillaboom won Worlds in 2023, I think in Seniors Division. Obviously, will that probably work as well in this format? Probably not. But I know Shohei Kimura used a clear amulet set going into Worlds this year. He was a 2023 World Champion, and it got him into day 2, and I think he made top 32 with it, if I'm not mistaken, or like somewhere around there. But yeah, like it's a really good Pokemon. Having access to Fake Out's amazing, and it also does a lot of damage. Plus, switching up the terrain's huge. The third best non-restricted, I would say, is Incineroar. Incineroar, it's probably the greatest competitive Pokemon of all time. Even with all the safeguards put in place against it, like there were items like Clear Amulet and Covert Cloak added this generation to kind of slow it down, and then you had Pokemon added that like just stopped Fake Out in total, like Farigiraf with its Armor Tail ability, plus you had special attack and ground types like, you know, Ursaluna Blood Moon added, which also gave it problems, but even with that, it just hasn't like slowed it down all that much. It won NAIC. I think it did well at Japanese Nationals. It did all right at Worlds. The thing is, I think Incineroar is starting to slow down a little bit in like its viability, just because again, with all those safeguards in place, people are starting to like actually run them on their teams. But all in all, I think it's probably the third best non-restricted. I think as the format goes by, though, it's going to start dropping down a little bit to maybe like somewhere over here. But even then, it's still going to be like an A tier Pokemon. Going to S tier, I don't know why Sinashta was in here. That was a mistake. Sorry. Going into S tier, I think both Urshifus belong in here. They just... they are the... Like, how do I say it? They're just the most broken, non-restricted Pokemon ever added in the game's history. Like, they actually are game-breaking Pokemon. Obviously, like, Rapid Strike, I would say, is the better of the two Pokemon, but obviously with it being prepared for a lot more often, it has kind of left a window open for Urshifu's Single Strike. They both have abilities where they could just go through Protect. They both have signature moves, which are just absurd, where they crit all the time, so they ignore any stat changes, like, just in general. It's just, like, they're such, like, game-breaking Pokemon. And going into this generation, like, you think they would have nerfed them, but they didn't, which was insane to me. But, yeah, they are by far, like, an absolute runaway, the best non-restricted Pokemon. They won Japanese Nationals, they won NAIC, they won Worlds. It's just like the success of this Pokemon is just insane. It got first and second place and third place and fourth place at Worlds this year, with Single Strike I think getting third or fourth, and then Rapid Strike getting the other 3 spots. It got first at Japanese Nationals. I don't know if it got second, so don't quote me on that, but at NAIC it got first and second. Like, it's just such a dominant Pokemon. Please nerf this thing going into next generation, because I can't deal with it anymore, man. It's they're too strong. With that being said, though, I think that also the thing about Urshifu is that I feel if you aren't running it on your team, you're inherently putting yourself at such a disadvantage, just because not only are they so much stronger than all the other non-restricted Pokemon by like a good amount, and that's saying something considering like how strong some of these other things are, but they're also flat out just stronger than some restricted Pokemon, which is like insane to think about, but it's just true. But yeah, I feel like if you're starting a team, you start with the restricted Pokemon first, obviously, because that's the centerpiece, and then you add either or, because like to not run these would be, you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage out of the gates, not running Urshifu on your team. So yeah, I know that was a very long and winded video. I apologize for that, but I wanted to kind of go in detail on a lot of this stuff. But you guys tell me what you think. I'll catch you all next time. Regulation G is around the corner. It's only like a few days away. So yeah, but everyone take care. Have a happy holidays, and I will see you all next time.